Great. This is a great turnout. Beautiful weather. I'm surprised so many people showed up instead of walking through the woods on this beautiful fall day. But I tried to capture some of the fall foliage here. So it's not quite the same, I understand. Thank you all for joining us today on behalf of our board of directors, our residents, our staff. It's an honor to have you here with us. I know many of you have been to fall gatherings in the past, and this year we wanted to have a panel of professionals come together to talk about some of the opportunities there are for downsizing, for as far as lending services, as far as the real estate market. So we brought together a panel to address some of those questions. So we'll spend some time with our panel talking about that. Because of the schedule, it is a pretty tight schedule, as you can see. We really wanted to just save questions for the lunch hour. Our panel will join us for lunch, so feel free to talk to them there at that point. In a few minutes, Becky Smith, our executive director, will talk about several initiatives here at Kendal, Hanover. And when she saw the schedule today, she had more time dedicated, but she took the initiative and said, you know what, hey, I'll make my comments brief so that our panel can put out that great information that so many of you are interested in. So thank you, Becky. Now, we've held downsizing seminars here in the past where we've had, you'll meet them shortly, Alice and Carol talk specifically to a small group about the opportunities in downsizing. So we have them here to discuss that. We also have Mary Jane Clark, who I'll introduce, but to talk about the appraisal process and evaluating fine art. We also have Ned Redpath from Caldwell, and he'll talk about the real estate market and trends. And we also have John and Dan with us, who will talk specifically to some financial options that may be helpful for you. So we're very fortunate to have this panel with us today. We also have Peter Bean, who he's been a resident here for about 13 years. Is that right, Peter? Right, a resident of 13 years here. He is in the 80s. He helped create Kendal at Hanover. So he'll talk about Quaker values here at Kendal. So a few administrative notes before we launch into things. As I said, the schedule is tight. So at 1 o'clock after lunch, our tour guides will meet up in the living room. And the living room is directly behind us, outside of the dining room. And tour guides will have the apartments by style. You all have I think you have the handouts available. But they will take you to that apartment. And we have several different apartment options for some of the styles, so we'll break out from there. But be sure at 1 o'clock, if you're looking for a specific apartment to go to, we'll meet right there in the living room, okay? And then we'll leave from there. There is one apartment that we have in Furbank Fell that's available for a tour, and that's apartment 1010. And to get to Furbank Fell from here, instead of taking a left out of the gathering room, take a right and go all the way through the health center. You'll see the double doors. It is a straight path, and that will take you to Furbank Fell. The apartments that are open for tours are designated with balloons out in front, so that hopefully some of the residents don't have a birthday, so they put up their own balloons and you walk in. But we do have balloons out in front of the open apartments. And my recommendation, I know some of you have mentioned, oh, you haven't been here that long. It's been a year. I know my way around. So I'll be available to give advice, and I promise I will not get you lost. But we also have Lisa Stone. Lisa, can you stand up? I know many of you are familiar with Lisa. Ashley Parker, did she just, okay, she's, and David Urso. David, you mind? So some familiar faces. We're available to help you during the tour portion. Certainly feel free to come to us with any of your questions. Finally, try to leave the apartments by 2:30. Our residents have graciously offered to open up their homes, and we needed to establish some time period of when not to expect anyone anymore. And we said 2:30 is probably a good stopping point for the tours. So you can come back to the community center and just kind of relax. You can come and talk to myself, Ashley, and Lisa. We'll be available all day. But just some administrative notes there. At this time, I'd like to introduce Becky Smith. Becky is Kendal Hanover's Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer. And you've been here for 10 years now, right? Couple days shy. When's your anniversary? Saturday is your anniversary. 10 years. You don't want to say that in the microphone. All right. Thank you.
Try to keep that low key. Thank you. Yes, I came here when I was 20. And anyway, so I think back 10 years ago to my first fall gathering, and I think my first fall gathering, Jeff, was on my 3rd day of employment. And I said, I was lucky to even know how to find the gathering room, never mind what to talk to you about. But Jeff is now here for his 2nd. We're thrilled that Jeff has had his 1st anniversary with us about a month ago, so thank you. Before I just have some brief remarks, I just want to especially thank Jeff and Lisa and Ashley for all the work to put this event together. It's a big task, but it seems like it just happens. But also to our dining services department, they just do a phenomenal job. Environmental services for getting everything set up. Our staff make this happen. So thank you to all the staff. Thank you. What I wanted to say to you today is to talk about one specific initiative that has happened here over the course of the last couple of years, but it really talks about how we as a community work together. Whether it's a group of staff, and here's a resident, doing cleanup of the Connecticut River, or whether it's a garden party where we bring residents and staff to celebrate the great vegetables and the gardens that we have here, or whether it's a project from our Kendal Cares Committee to put together holiday baskets that are delivered to older adults that are served by the Grafton County Senior Citizens Council, who that makes their holiday. And that was a project that was done last year, and we're going to do again this year. Give you a sense of how we as a community work together to do good work and to also enjoy the work together. And that will be in keeping with what I know Peter will talk about, our values. But there's another example of that I want to talk about for just a moment. And you should have read about, I hope you read about this in our recent newsletter. If not, go home and dig it out. But that's about a fund called the Elizabeth Fry Fund. And this is also near and dear to Peter's heart. The Elizabeth Fry Fund has been developed so that we have the ability to give some entrance fee assistance to folks who might not otherwise be able to come to Kendal and Hanover. Specifically, folks who have lived a life of service, perhaps worked in a nonprofit where they have not had the asset accumulation or the home to be able to sell, and to be able to give assistance. This is something that Kendal and Hanover have been talking about, I think, probably since day one, Peter. And how do you make this happen? Because what it was really going to require was a very large endowment. Now, we have a large endowment for our Cadbury Fund, which is monthly fee assistance for residents who live here who might need some assistance eventually, but it was that entry fee. What happened with this is we had two committees here, our Diversity and Inclusion Committee and our Committee on Gifts and Bequests, who really said, we gotta figure this out. And then we had a couple of residents really take this on as a passion. How do other communities do it? What's out there? And we all worked together to develop this fund. Residents have donated to that fund so that we got to the point where we could say, we are ready to bring in someone, or, as we can, to bring in folks who might not otherwise be able to come here. That is just an example of how we set a goal. We may not know how to do it, but we figure it out and we work together and we make it happen. And I am very, very proud of that. So if you know of anyone who might say to you, gee, I don't know if I could afford to move to Kendal. I'm not sure I have enough of the entrance fee. Tell them to give us a buzz, to talk to Jeff. It's all confidential. No one is going to know who's moving in here except for very limited folks. And it's just something that we're so, so proud of. And just a word from, I was talking with the co-chair of our Committee on Gifts and Bequests this morning, and she said, just make sure everyone knows this is not a one-time thing. This is going to keep going forward. We are going to keep that fund healthy so that we can support this program. So just a little bit about how we come together and achieve these wonderful things here. So thank you for coming. I am not going to go any further because I really want to be sure that our folks, our guests have enough time to share their information, and I want to thank all of you as well for being with us today and sharing your wealth of knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. So I'm going to introduce the panel shortly, but I just want to do one thing. And we had a presentation about 2 weeks ago to residents and staff, as well as our board. And part of that presentation, as soon as I saw it, I said, wow, this is something we can use at the fall gathering. And it's a very important concept just to keep in mind as we introduce the panel and talk throughout the day. Very important.
I would have been out here a little bit sooner, but they gave me the wrong dressing room, and I couldn't find any place to put my stuff. And I don't know how you are, but I need a place to put my stuff. So that's what I've been doing back there, just trying to find a place for my stuff. You know how important that is. That's the whole meaning of life, isn't it? Trying to find a place for your stuff. That's all your house is. Your house is just a place for your stuff. If you didn't have so much goddamn stuff, you wouldn't need a house. You could just walk around all the time. That's all your house is. It's a pile of stuff with a cover on it. You see that when you take off in an airplane and you look down and you see everybody's got a little pile of stuff. Everybody's got their own pile of stuff. And when you leave your stuff, you gotta lock it up. Wouldn't want somebody to come by and take some of your stuff. They always take the good stuff. They don't bother with that crap you're saving. Ain't nobody interested in your 4th grade arithmetic papers. They're looking for the good stuff. That's all your house is. It's a place to keep your stuff while you go out and get more stuff. Now, sometimes you've got to move. You've got to get a bigger house. Why? Too much stuff. You've got to move all your stuff. And maybe put some of your stuff in storage. Imagine that. There's a whole industry based on keeping an eye on your stuff. Enough about your stuff. Let's talk about other people's stuff.
So, we have some people here who will be talking to you about your stuff. And sorry, 2 weeks ago, this just said, we've got to show it. So. At this point, I'd like to introduce our panel. And I saw people talking with our panel members, so that I know there's some familiarity with the Upper Valley residents, with people who have volunteered and are willing to join us up on stage. So I just want to give you a quick introduction. We'll begin with Carol Carr, and as I call you up, please come up on stage. Carol Carr and Alice Strenta have been providing downsizing services in the Upper Valley for years, and they began Downsize and Spruce it up together in 2008. So welcome, Carol and Alice. Mary Jane Clark. Mary Jane Clark is a qualified personal property appraiser with over 30 years of experience in the art world. She is a specialist in Asian, American, and European fine and decorative arts and antiquities. Welcome, Mary Jane. Ned Redpath. Ned has been in real estate for over 45 years. He is the owner and president of Coldwell Banker, Redpath and Company. Welcome, Ned. John O'Dowd is a senior wealth consultant at Ledyard Bank. He is a certified trust and financial advisor with over 20 years of investment and wealth management experience. Welcome, John. Dan Emanuel is a senior vice president and private banking manager at Ledyard Bank. He has 26 years of banking experience, holding various responsibilities as portfolio manager and risk manager. Welcome, Dan. Thank you all for joining us, and what we'd like to do, I think this microphone is on, is begin with Carol and Alice to talk about downsizing a little bit, and that will lead into discussions with our other panelists. So.
Well, Jeff, I first of all think that was rude of you to put George Carlin in front of me, saying exactly what I was going to say. As one, good for you. You're here, you're being proactive, and you're thinking of downsizing. So downsizing is an emotional battle for most people. But like George just said, most of it is stuff that you either have not made a judgment on where things are going to go, whether you should get rid of them or if you should give them to your family. Be always in the mindset that it is just stuff. There are a few items that you are going to want, you are going to care for, that you want to move into your new apartments. That's your important stuff. The other stuff, you need to find ways of relocating it. Might be a better way of saying it. Mary Jane is a perfect one if you have any art that's interesting and you want to find whether you should relocate it to a specific area. She's your person. Alice and I know auctioneers that you can relocate. The biggest thing that we find is don't think your children are going to take your relocation. They love your things in your house, but those are your things. And grandparents and aunts and uncles' items really, as much as you'd like to think are very important to them, do take a back seat. And kids today, one, they don't have the income to find that big house that George Carlin's, some do. But there's a lot of them start slow and steady, and they will get that big house, but they don't want your stuff in it to start off. They want their own. And you are not the only people that do this. Alice is going to talk briefly on someone you might all know, and that he also has stuff.
Hi, good morning. My case study this morning, because no one really wants to talk about their own stuff in a public setting, is someone you probably all do know, and his name is Ringo Starr. Ringo just sold his big house in the country and closed down his apartment in Monte Carlo. He had a lot of stuff. And the good thing about Ringo is that he and his wife decided, what are we going to do with all this stuff? And their answer was, get rid of it. So what kind of stuff would Ringo have? And how much would he have to purge, which is the word he chose to use? And how did he come to decide to part with things that everyone in the world sort of knows? How did he assign a value to those things? So he went to an auction house and said, I have a lot of stuff and I need a downsizer to help me. And so the question became, how many drum sets does Ringo Starr need? Well, he has a 7 tom-tom drum set, which is rather large, not going to fit in his current place. And he also had the world-famous Black Oyster drum set that you all know from Ed Sullivan, Shea Stadium. How did he decide? Well, he said, I can't fit it, so it has to go. How would Ringo Starr dispose of his jewelry? What kinds of jewelry might he have? Well, he has rings, and they're going. And he struggled, he and his wife, and many times they took things out of the auction pile and moved it back into the keep pile. And then they said, oh my gosh, this isn't going to fit. And we don't want to have storage units. So it went back into the auction pile. And I really love some of the things he put in the auction pile. His rings, his watches, and this. How many tuxedos did Ringo have? Well, he put them in the auction pile, especially the one from his Rock and Roll Hall of Fame installation in the evening, which must have meant a lot to him, but he didn't have any more space in his closet. How about his guitar gift from John Lennon? He put it in the auction. He said, all this stuff is too much to have, and it will give joy to other people. So all the proceeds will go to my foundation, and I will be able to do something good for everyone. And so I guess if Ringo can get rid of his rings and his drums, then all of us can get rid of some of our things too. And then we won't need such a big place to put all our stuff.
So we're just going to pass the microphone down, but it's interesting because they didn't know about George Carlin's video in advance, so it's a great tie-in, and thank you for adjusting what you were going to speak to fit stuff. Okay, so thank you. Mary.
Not only are they flexible enough to jump in after George Carlin, but they actually told you half of what I was already going to say, so this makes it a lot easier for me. I was going to be a lot more serious and really give you some nitty-gritty about working with appraisers or other professionals that help you sort and get ready for your move to Kendal. If your family doesn't want the stuff, which is often the case, as you know, they don't want to polish silver, they don't want the china that has the gold rim because it doesn't go in the microwave. They don't want to polish silver, and they don't entertain, and they won't want that tea service. Once you've decided what you can give to them, what they will take, you really only have 2 options left. Either you donate things, or you try to sell them. And in most cases, you may want some professional help. If you do get some professional help, like an appraiser of some sort, and I'll describe a few kinds, you can do everything from walkthroughs, where someone professional with a good eye can walk through your house and really point out the major pieces that you might want to think about, whether you want to take them and bring them here to Kendal or not. That's obviously your choice. You can get consultations, you can get written appraisals if you're worried about insurance, or if you want to have an inventory to share with your children to help them with the decision-making process. And if you are going to make any charitable donations, an appraiser certainly can help you with your IRS deductions and filling out the proper paperwork. So really, I just wanted to stress a lot of common sense kinds of things. What are your goals and expectations? Obviously, if you do work with a professional, you want to find someone who is accurate, professionally credible, and who you can trust. You want sound advice in a timely fashion. None of us have forever to get our lives organized here for downsizing, and you want to make sure that any professional you work with has a good sense of what your goals are and what your situation is in terms of timing. Different kinds of appraisers, they come from all sorts of different areas. You can work with people from art galleries, antique shops. There are auction houses, specialized dealers can also appraise. In some cases, you may prefer to work with an independent personal property appraiser, someone who does not buy, does not sell, has no horse in the race, is not going to be influenced by anything that they are interested in. And if, for example, one client told me recently, a woman came to quote-unquote appraise some things in her house and walked in and started saying, gee, I'll offer you this and this and this for that and that and that. Clearly was there to buy, not really to be an objective appraiser. I suggested that she run the other way, and apparently she kicked the lady out. So just wanted to let you know that. Other places to find appraisers is certainly online, but you pretty much get what you pay for, and do keep that in mind. If you can't meet someone face-to-face, eye to eye, I'm always a little bit skeptical about that. I really like to work with someone that I can talk to, that I know will communicate with me in great detail. Every time I have a question, I would want to be able to ask them questions and have them get back to me. So working online is not necessarily recommended. And I did want to point out that museums cannot appraise. Occasionally people come to me in frustration and say, I called my local museum and they refused to appraise my highboy or my 19th century portrait. The point is that museums can't appraise. It's considered unethical to do so. They can certainly identify any objects you have, tell you who made it, when it was made, what it's made of. They could also say something like, well, take it home and enjoy it, which is at the other end of the spectrum, is yes, you have something of certain value, and yes, you should have it appraised by a professional appraiser. But other than that, they cannot give you a value. So please don't get mad at your local museum if they refuse to appraise, because they really are not supposed to. When you are selecting a professional, I highly recommend, as I just said, make sure you ask lots of questions. Keep asking questions until you get all the answers, keeping in mind that an appraisal or any kind of evaluation or consultation does take time. It will cost you money. I know life looks like Antiques Roadshow, but it's not quite that way. And everybody seems to think that somebody will just walk in and give you some information and there is no charge. But appraisers do charge for their time. And you're paying for their time and expertise, obviously. And also keep in mind that if you do work with a professional, that you want to be able to let them have personal access to any objects that you want them to look at. Unless there's only one specialist in the country and he's out in Wisconsin, I would not recommend working with an appraiser long distance, because any appraiser worth his or her salt will want to inspect an object in person. So overall, when you're looking for a professional, you're going to want to look for someone who has the qualifications, the professional training and the experience that you're looking for that sort of match what the items are that you want them to look at. If there is an object that has is sort of quirky and you want someone with special expertise, keep that in mind. That's something to consider. If you want someone to look at South Pacific carved canoes, you know, you need to make sure you find the right person who really understands the market, understands what you have and how to approach it. In terms of just the personal side, I always look for accuracy. I used to be a copy editor, so I'm very, very fussy about typos. And if I see a document that has more than 2 or 3 typos in it, I start to question the entire document. I wonder exactly how accurate and how careful that person is. So that's my own bias, but do keep that in mind, that you want to have accurate information to help you make good decisions. And also keep in mind that whichever professional you choose to work with, whether it's a dealer, whether it's an auctioneer, whether it's an independent appraiser, you want to make sure that they have the right perspective. If you are planning to sell something at auction, yes, work with an auctioneer. But if you want something that's independent and impartial, you may prefer to work with an independent appraiser. And as far as getting resources and referrals, the obvious sources, talk with your attorney, talk with your CPA, talk with insurance companies, the retirement facility that you're going to, local museums, historical societies, conservators, frame shops, Art galleries, those people have their finger on the pulse of who are the professionals out there who might be able to advise you. Any professional organizations you might find listed online for appraising. Also, if you're donating to a charitable organization, you could talk with them and see if they have any referrals of local resources that could help you. Talk with friends and online sources occasionally can also help as well. So that's it for now. I'll be around, as everyone else will afterwards, and we can always answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ned,
Hi, Jack.
stuff. How about property stuff? How about that?
I'm going to stand because I can't see half of you over this recording plant here, but I'm really pleased and excited to be able to join you this morning. Kendal and its population have always been a huge inspiration to me, mainly because of their involvement in the community. And everywhere I go, they're there. I go to the movies, I go to the hop, I go to athletics, I go to dinner out, I go to the golf course, and they're there. So you have a great adventure ahead of you in the decision. 2015 has been a very good year for real estate. Certainly I'm pleased with it, and I think everybody who owns a house or a property or condominium or land is also pleased. It's been a long and very tedious time to make up ground since 2006, but it does appear that we are getting to that stage where we're about at the level of 2008 or 2007. In general, we don't want to be where we were in 2005 or we'll crash again. So let's just have this nice steady growth. I'm going to give you a few statistics. I'm not sure what you want to hear, so I'm going to give you a bunch of statistics, and maybe later if you have specific questions about housing or what's going on, please feel free to circle me or grab me and ask. In 2015, closed sales in general were close to being up 2%. So if you look at all the closed sales that have happened so far in 2015, we have about 2% more than we did last year. Pending sales are up 12%. And I think that is because the statistics that I've seen came more after the spring, and that was the busiest part. We have more closings in July 1st than we do almost the whole time to January. So January to July 1st, we've had a few, but on July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, we have almost everything. So that really happened. So pendings are up also. Days on the market, which are very important to you if you're thinking of moving, are down about 1.5%. So we're at about 129 days on the market. That means from the time you decide to sell a home to the fact that it is sold is about 129 days. Back in 2007, 8, and 9, we were talking 280, 300 days. So maybe even 365 days. So it's a lot harder. But right now it's going very well. Pricing in general is relatively stable with a few realistic adjustments. For homes that are valued under 300,000, 300,000 and down, that price range is down about 3%. There's a little bit less value. That's not a big jump. That's about $9,000 or so. For homes valued 300 to 600,000, that's the bulk of the market in our Upper Valley area, they're up to 5%. That's about the max you want to see. If home prices start getting up to 10, 15, or 25% like we saw in 2005, we're in real trouble. Because we're passing the capability of buyers to buy. And we're going so fast that we're going to start heading down. So 5% is pretty good. Value of $600,000 to $1 million right now is down about 3%. I don't know why, but that's what the statistics say. And on the other hand, for homes that are over $1 million, their value's up 20%. 20%. But you got to remember, $300,000, $1 million, you know, you're making a lot more money on $1 million, so that percent gap is quite large. What we like about the market right now is that employment is very high. It's outstanding in New Hampshire and Vermont, particularly within the Upper Valley. The other thing that's very exciting is that interest rates remain low, though there might be a change coming. Though with the political year coming up, I'm not sure anybody wants to increase interest rates. 1% of an increase in your interest rates eliminates 10% of your mortgage capabilities. So if the interest rate goes up 1%, you have a $100,000 mortgage at the old rate, and it goes up 1%, you can probably only afford $90,000 instead of $100,000. Inventory for the Upper Valley right now is relatively low. It's been low all year, and that's a national trend. It's not just the Upper Valley. And for whatever reason, we haven't been able to get as many homes on the market as we usually like to have. But I think that is going to change between now, which is generally a slower time of the year, until beginning of January or 1st of February, we'll see more homes on the market. It's a good thing if you are thinking of selling that you do have a low inventory, because there are a lot of buyers out there throughout the year that haven't made a decision. And if your home is well priced to the market value and has been stuffed clear and is in excellent condition, we are going to sell your home well under 129 days. It is a hot point. If there are things that most buyers today do not want to have to put money into a home over and above what they pay for it, because they've had an experience back in 2005, 2012, where people have lost money in real estate. So they don't want to take the risk that I'm going to put $50,000 into that house after paying X amount of money for it. So we want to make sure your home is all set, ready to go, shines, floors are done, new carpeting, painted, a nice wreath on the door, great presentation, and it will be very, very attractive to almost every single buyer. What do we look in the future right now? It's hard to say what's going on, and I don't like to predict it's going to be a great year next year, it's going to be an awful year or whatever. It is what it is, and you just look at the conditions as they go. The considerations that we look at are the economic conditions in China. I think all of you saw what happens when China folded in our stock market. Said, whoops, what's going on? And that's a shock. Why is China hitting us? But it does. European and everything else does affect us. Cheap foreign labor, which there's a lot of stuff being outsourced that may change the economy here in the States. And it's an election year coming up. That always has an effect on that particular year as far as economics go. And who knows what's going to happen there. So those are the things that we're looking for. I think we're going to continue on a nice, steady run as long as we're looking at 3.5% to maybe 5% appreciation every single year. We don't want to get much higher than that, or something will have to slow it down because we've outpaced the capability of the buyers to buy. And we don't need that right now. So that's where we are. I hope if you have any questions, you'll catch me or keep going. Thank you very much. I appreciate this. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you. John.
Thank you.
Trying to think of how stuff could be tied in here.
Oh, we've got stuff, Jeff. We've got stuff. Good morning, everyone. I'm here with my colleague, Dan Emanuel. Again, my name is John O'Dowd. I'm from Ledyard Financial Advisors, a division of Ledyard National Bank, and we're in the business of dealing with people's stuff. All kinds of stuff. You know, my wife said to me the other day, honey, at some point we're going to need to downsize. And I said, honey, I don't think so. We never upside. So we have more square footage in our driveway than our house. But we do have stuff. And when I go to work every day, when Dan goes to work every day, as a bonded corporate fiduciary, Ledyard Financial Advisors is responsible at a very high standard of care of dealing with people's personal property, their finances, and their investments. And I can tell you, when we're talking about stuff with my distinguished guest speakers, we're talking about emotion. It could be that little teacup that mom always used that doesn't have a lot of value is the most important thing in that house. Because if Susie gets it and Jane doesn't, Mom loves Susie more than Jane, right? So we deal with the importance of helping individuals, our clients, deal with the transitional phases of life, whether it's preparing for kids' education or grandkids, or whether it's pre-retirement, or people in retirement, or transitioning to a wonderful community like Kendal at Hanover here. So some of the considerations that we have for clients that are making this transition is if they're coming from a different state, so change of residency. How does that affect their personal income tax situation? How does that affect their personal estate plan situation? New Hampshire happens to be one of the more progressive states in the country in relation to estate planning, whether it's trust development or, again, overall estate planning. New Hampshire is very high on the list for asset protection, for portability, many things that other states are increasingly trying to get to the same level. So how does that transition from one residency to another affect that individual when they're coming to a community like Kendal? As I said, what impact does that have, negative or positive, on their overall income tax situation? What about cash flow needs? How are their personal assets being managed in a way if they're supplementing their cash flow needs every year? How much overall investment risk are they undertaking currently, and how, if any changes are necessary to address changes in cash flow needs? What about financing for the admission into a community again like Kendal? If we have clients with a primary residence that they're trying to sell and wanting to move in to Kendal because the doors are open now, we've been on a waiting list, how can we help them bridge that gap for that short-term period to allow for financing? And we have that through the pledging of investment assets that we're managing for those individuals. If we have clients that have secondary homes, homes that have been for lakefront property or recreational property that they want to keep in the family, and yet they want to have that formalized in a way, again, to reach that goal of providing for future generations. So there's a lot of considerations that we undertake to work with clients to ensure that we're dealing with all their stuff. We're dealing with management of their investable assets, we're dealing with real estate, and we're dealing with personal property and making that transition. And we work with these individuals in doing that as well. So it's a pretty broad scope when we think about it, and it's not just focused on a mere short-term finance transition. This is a transition of life that we're talking about, and one that we support our clients in making successfully. So that's it for me, and I know I have my colleague here. We're standing between you and a great lunch, so we're going to be brief. Okay? So Dan Emanuel.
And we will have time for some questions following Dan, but the best for last. Dan, go right ahead.
All right, not to disappoint. Thank you, John. Thank you, Jeff. Good morning, everyone. What can I add to what John just expressed? Those of you that are familiar with Ledyard National Bank know that Ledyard is a community bank. We offer all of the traditional services and products that any bank and any community bank might offer. And at the same time, we have this very sophisticated, very successful wealth management division, where we, for our clients, manage just over $1 billion in assets. So in between the two, the traditional banking side and the investment management side, we have private banking, which dovetails, if you will, the delivery of the investment services and the traditional banking services. In essence, we consolidate your relationship through one group, through one channel, such that you can affect the changes and affect the things that you need completed in a very efficient way, in a very a seamless way, and hopefully we are adding value to your relationship by being there in that capacity. It's a concierge service, if you will. I tell those in my group, when they get up in the morning, I want you to look in the mirror and practice saying, yep, we can do that. Yep, we can do that. Regulators might not like that, the compliance folks might not like that, but it's our job to find a way to help you reach your goal, help you reach your end, whether it's opening the simple checking accounts, savings accounts, or planning for your estate plan, planning, your tax planning, the titling of your accounts, etc. We work in tandem with John and the financial advisors, with the branches. Of course, any one of our branches, you're welcome. Our clients are welcome to use them at any time. But we want our private banking clients to know that their financial home is at 2 Maple Street. They can come and visit with us at any time, unannounced or announced, and share their concerns, their desires, their goals. And if we're doing our job appropriately, we are almost anticipating what some of those needs and goals will be in advance. So it is very much a comprehensive service. It is a personalized service, and really it speaks to the lifestyle that you know of here in the Upper Valley. It's really an extension of that. Great.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, panel. We have time for some questions, and we've got microphones that we've got available, but I'm going to start with a few questions. And Dan, right off the bat, we have some people who come through our doors that are interested in coming to Kendal, and they talk about bridge loans. And I'm not a banker, and I don't know what to talk to them about when they start asking, what's the benefit of a bridge loan? Not knowing specific situations. Can you talk to us briefly about how that may impact someone's decision to move to a community like Kendal?
Sure, thank you. Bridge loans are typically short-term financing instruments that help you bridge the gap and make the transition from one location to the next. They are typically secured loans, loans that require the repayment over the set period of time of interest only, with principal being due at maturity, or a combination thereof, depending upon your goals, your situation. Most often, for our clients, the bridge loan takes the form of a line of credit that is secured by the client's investment accounts under management with Ledger. In offering that, we can in essence offer a discounted rate to you. You're borrowing your own money. You should be able to leverage and command a lower rate and more favorable terms. So that's the most common form of bridge loan that we see for clients that may be looking to enter Kendal. John, would you like to add anything to that?
Just to Ledger Financial Advisors, we do offer an equity line based on the pledging of an investment account, and that's tied toward the Wall Street Journal Prime, less 25 basis points. So right now that would be a loan for 3% over a 5-year term, interest only. And again, the purpose of the loan is to assist in the transition on a short-term basis for financing needs. It just follows along with what Dan offered earlier.
Great. Thank you, Joshua. Any questions from the one right there? Okay.
Can IRA assets collateralize such a loan?
Terrific question, and the answer is no. No. IRA assets or other types of accounts, ERISA accounts, qualified plans, etc., are not eligible for that pledge, and that's not our decision. That's the regulatory decision. So, great question.
Yeah, right up front, actually.
Thank you. Quick question for Ned. This statistics that you gave in your talk, are those national averages or were those all local for the Upper Valley?
Those are totally for 14 communities right around the Upper Valley. We didn't think you're all that excited about Arizona. Well, you might be Arizona. But we tried to stay right here. We did it for the 3 counties. We did it for Hanover, Lebanon, and Hartford. And we did it for the 14 communities right around here. And those were for the 14.
This is for Ned. Is there a time of year when it's best to put your house on the market based on the hiring by the medical center or the college?
We find that basically in the Upper Valley, the real estate market runs 364 days. Let's take Christmas off. So we like to think that during December we're talking to you about getting it ready to go. What do you have to do? And in general, January 15th to February 1st is the beginning. And it runs very hard. Most of our business, 60% of our business is done, maybe even 70% is done within the first half of the year. So you want to have it in that market. That's when the buyers start coming in. That's when they start looking on the computer and seeing what's going on. So January 15th, you don't want to be any later than April 1st, really. Will you sell your house after it? Absolutely. 364 days is our market. So that's what I'd recommend.
Ned, you were talking about residents with certain value and giving statistics for certain ranges. In the range of $300,000 to $600,000, would there be any difference in your comments for a condominium versus a home?
The condominiums are in those figures. Condominiums may be a little slower in their time on the market, may be a little slower because it's a secondary thought. Condominiums still are secondary thoughts. Most people are thinking of primary home, a single family, disconnected home. So the condominium takes a little bit of energy and education. But they do fall within the same 5% in that particular area.
So I have a question for Carol and Alice, and there's another microphone too. Okay, great. Because I've heard their downsizing presentations before, and they had a lot of humor to it. But I want to ask you, let me explain too. We had a resident move in probably about 6 months ago, and we will go in and say, welcome to Kendal, and just stop in and see how everything's going. And we walked into this resident's apartment, and there's Carol. And she is moving boxes around, going through boxes. She had boxes stacked, well, about this high. I don't know how you did it. What did you had a ladder.
Super strength.
Okay, super strength. But what are some of the common items that when you talk to people who are downsized, what are some of the common items you see? What's the stuff that you see most that people hold on to, but there's no real need to?
I think our primary problem is China. China that you kept forever because it was your mother's or your own. If you love China, please bring it with you to Kendal and use it. Put it in the dishwasher even though you're not supposed to, because the gold is not going to come off in the next 20 years. So those are the things, if you really love something, it's almost like when I was a little girl, it used to be the Sunday best. It's the same thing with your china and your crystal. The Sunday best is only best because you've worn it only 5 times in your life. So now you can take those things, use it. China is a wonderful product because it's very light. It's very accommodating to move around, and you don't have a big stoneware. You know, stoneware had gotten really popular for a while, and it's heavy and it's difficult to move. So I would say China's our biggest problem because it does not sell also.
And I would add to that linens, towels, sheets, they're all beautiful, but you don't really need as many as you have. And one of the things Carol and I like to say is downsizing is a lot like voting in Chicago, early and often.
I have just one other comment that it's been interesting since we've been doing this downsizing. How I have downsized myself. I do have a particular fondness for dinnerware and linens. So it's funny that the things that I like, I see myself going, oh my God, I can't become that. So I've stopped buying things, and then also I've limited the amount of towels. You know, I have 3 grown boys, they come in with guests. We have X amount of towels, I leave them in a basket in each room, and those are their towels. And then in our bathrooms, there's a few. You really only need 2 towels a person. You know, I'm being very general, but in a small area, if you're moving into Kendal, if you have 4 towels, you can fluff those up every once in a while very easily. So just remember, quantity doesn't necessarily need to be brought into Kendal.
Yeah, sure. My question maybe, it won't be hard to answer just in the time we have it, but it's a suggestion really as well as a question. And that is, I've heard talks like this before, moving to the specific would be very helpful. If someone was coming into Kendal, having a list of places that would help downsize and spruce it up, you would be such a list. Likewise, in the appraisal, a list of appraisers that you would approve of. Likewise for Ned, I understand most houses now, which are implied in your remarks, is you really need to spruce them up and make them look good. I understand there are companies that will do that for you, suggest the rug, put the rug in, paint the walls, whatever. It'd be nice, again, to have such a list you go right to when you're ready to get into Kendal.
So the resources.
Suggestions for
Yeah.
Kendal. We made it a year or so ago, but I don't think I've ever seen such a list yet.
It's been a while since we've updated that and done some work on that, so. Yeah. Yes, sorry.
Just as a general comment to you, we have MJ and Carol and Alice on a vendor list. We have a concierge in our office that if you come in and sit down, they will give you a list of 2 or 3 people to do that. And I think a lot of people do that. You may even make recommendations also. So some of that, you're absolutely on target. No question about it.
Thanks.
That's great.
Yeah, go ahead, Carol.
I just as a curiosity, what you're saying right now, when Alice and I had started our business, that's kind of what we wanted to do. People were moving from homes that are 1970s vintage, and we thought, oh, we'll be almost general contractors. We'll help them spruce it up. That's how we got that part. But before you can do the sprucing up, you have to do the removal of items. So, and that is a very time-consuming process. So, like Alice said, fairly often and revisit things. It's very helpful.
One question?
Another question for Carol and Alice. What's your sense of, do people downsize sufficiently when they move here, or is there another round that always happens once you've made the transition?
Well, I think you do it multiple times. Alice and I are pretty kind to people when they're in their homes. Pretty. And then realistically, when it's time to come into Kendal, then we start to get a little tougher and we say, see those two cabinets? That's all the cabinet you have. So if you can't fit your items in that cabinet, they're just going to be taken out of Kendal very quickly. So it's kind of, you need that support from someone, be it your family member, your husband, your wife, that you have to start looking seriously at the amount of space. You have one closet, so you take one closet, and once you fill that in your home, that's all you're going to be able to take. Because it is extremely stressful to come into Kendal with too many boxes. Because then you're going, oh my gosh, I have no place to put this.
I think a key component of that is to know the value of your things. We helped a woman, and she told us pretty consistently that she was taking this particular item with her. And then the auctioneer came in and said, oh, you're taking that, that's too bad, because in the current market, that's probably the most valuable thing you have. And it took less than 10 seconds for that to go on the truck. So you can really help yourself by knowing pretty much what everything is valued at. And, you know, there will be surprises. And it's best to prepare for those surprises. And Carol gave a big heads up about China. And just so you take it personally, in our experience, almost everyone has 5 sets. Which you think about where those 5 sets are, and you remember they're in the basement. They're about boxed up from the last move. And when you see them, you'll love them again, but you have to think about that ahead of time.
Mary Jane.
I just wanted to add to that, when we were talking about linens, my experience is that clients not only will keep the extra towels, but they will keep all the embroidered napkins and tablecloths. And I do have one client who had 40 tablecloths that I could not pry out of her hands. And I kept telling her that that's the idea. You're going to Kendal to have a good time. You're not going to be entertaining. You're not going to have to throw those dinner parties that you used to have to do. And it was very difficult for her because that represented her memories. So what we did was, I believe with her, was we took photographs of some of her favorite pieces so that she had that little memory to go with her. But those kinds of objects is something that an appraiser can oftentimes help you find a new home for, whether it's a museum, a historical society, your alma mater, maybe a school, a technical institution will want all your tools. You know, they can use them in different ways. So there's all sorts of repurposing that professionals can help you with as you're doing your downsizing.
One question.
Actually, it's partly a comment. My husband and I are thinking that we're getting quite close to going on the wait list, so we've been looking at these kinds of questions, and they're very, very difficult. Trying to find a positive way to go forward into Kendal with our lives has been our major issue. And for us, and this is strictly personal, but perhaps it might be, it might give you something to think about too. What we're looking at is, what are we going to be using in our life as we make the transition and become part of a new community? What do we not want to leave behind in terms of who we are and what we do on a day-to-day basis? What our interests are that will be part of the way we make our way in a new community. Those are the things we don't want to leave behind. And it's very hard to make those decisions. We'll be using our time in new ways. Does that mean that things that we haven't done with, say, our books or our music or our other intellectual activities, that we'll be using them more in this new situation? But I think those are important questions if those kinds of things are part of your life. Looking at who you will be and what you will be doing going forward and what you really can use as part of that new life. Thank you.
Very well put. Thank you. So a few other hands.
Following that idea, it might be really helpful if you prepared some lists and said, if you have a one-bedroom apartment, here you have room for 1 sofa, 6 cartons of books, 4 towels. Actually, give specific examples of what's going to fit. I think it would be a shocker to a lot of us, and for the different size apartments. I think lists like that could be pictures. I mean, how many pictures can you fit on a Kendal wall in a 2-bedroom again?
Go ahead, Carol.
I think you'll find, if you go to the tours today of different people's apartments, you'll be amazed at how you'll go into the same structure and see completely different home. There are some people that will put artwork all along their walls that you might say, I would never do that, but yet you go into that apartment and you say, this is a warm environment. You might have someone that have very simple four chairs around a coffee table and think, never thought of that, but I do like that. There are specifics, like your bed can only be so big. You can take one bureau. Large couches probably aren't going to work, but some people don't like love seats. So you may say, I want one large couch and 2 chairs. There is a list you probably could make, but they would be more size dimensions rather than official items.
I once heard a talk at Tuck, and it was a retirement talk, and the person said, look at your accomplishments and not the things you haven't done, and make your choices based on your accomplishments, because the chances are in your retirement you will continue in those subject areas. And you are, when you make choices about what to bring, it should be based on your accomplishments, not on the things you have not accomplished. So if you think about your items and what kind of life you want to lead, you will at least be able to get started on it. Including, if you go out every day and fish, you may need 6 towels, not 4. So it's and that's the kind of thing that only you would know.
Thank you. So I'll ask a question of either John or Dan, but what should someone, when they're preparing to meet with you for the first time, talking about either wealth management or let's just say, what should they bring with them to be prepared for that discussion?
Sure, thank you, Jeff. So what we're essentially all talking about here is change and the risk associated with change. I think the number one question we're asked to answer on behalf of our clients is, am I going to be okay? If there's volatility in the market, if there's, as I talked earlier, a life transition that's going to occur, am I going to be okay? And the way we answer those questions is to ensure that we understand what the needs of the client are, and we plan towards that change. So on the financial side, it's important for us to have a complete understanding of their current estate plan, have a complete understanding of their personal income tax situation, what their overall investable assets, and what their, most importantly, what their needs are in association with all those things. And so how does this transition to a community like Kendal, how does that impact those specific aspects of their life? And so planning towards that transition is incredibly important, because what we try to avoid and what our goal is to make sure there's no bad surprises. And so that's being prepared. That's having us have a complete knowledge of those individuals or individual to make sure that the transition meets their expectation and goals.
Question, sorry.
Thank you for this excellent discussion. I have a question that has to do with disposal of assets as one comes into Kendal, and it has 2 components to it. One is essentially the boundaries of personal space at Kendal, and the other has to do with Kendal's willingness to accept donations. I note with interest that many of the walls in public spaces have a lot of art on them. Does Kendal accept gifts of art too large for an apartment to put in halls? Do residents have a kind of extension of personal space into what might be conceived of public space? I'd be interested to know what Kendal does with that.
So we do have a resident-run decorating committee, and they're able to take art in and assess, okay, where is the best place for this piece? So if a donation came in, they would assess, okay, is this is this something that we can maintain? I would defer those questions to that decorating committee and the art committee, but you know, there's those types of questions are taken into consideration because we have so many people who come here with so much art that they say, what should I do with it? Obviously, you talk about the hallways. You'll see this today. I'm sure many of you have already seen it. The art that's in the hall is the art of, it represents the resident on the other side of that wall. And they decorate their walls, and at the same time, we have art walks where people like to change the what's on display around frequently. So what may be there one day could completely change the next day, and that's because it's the residents' choice. They enjoy that freedom to move pieces around. So I can talk with you after about linking up with our decorating committee. Absolutely. So,
I think this is for Mary Jane. Suppose we have a house full of furniture and artwork and all kinds of things, and our kids have taken what they want. Is it financially better to have an auctioneer come in, or an expert appraiser who puts a price on everything and then invites people in to look and buy?
I think I'm on now. Okay. That's a really good question. If the object is something that your local auctioneer feels will sell appropriately, and I use the word appropriately in this location, then yes, by all means, if you want to sell something, talk to your local auctioneer. It may not necessarily be, however, the best market for that. Navajo jewelry may not sell very well in the Upper Valley, or something Asian may not sell here as well as it would in an urban area, say in New York or in Boston or even Montreal or London. So it really depends on the objects you're speaking about to make sure that you get it into the right market. This is something that an appraiser or an art consultant can certainly help you with, to evaluate what you have, talk to you about the value. Then you, with that knowledge is power, remember, with that knowledge you can then select the best option that works for that object and make sure it gets into the right market. Most appraisers, what you described was an appraiser evaluating what you have though and then putting it up for sale. Most appraisers do not buy and do not sell if they are independent appraisers. We want to maintain our purity, as it were, our unbiased, impartial position. And so an appraiser will not offer to buy and will not offer to sell. An appraiser might work as a broker, however, which is to facilitate a sale that you might want to make. For example, I had a client here at Kendal who had a Tiffany lamp. She's 85 years old. The best market for the Tiffany lamp, which was very, very fragile and very old and in spectacular condition, needed to go to New York City. And this 85-year-old lady was not about to get in her car and drive to New York City with a Tiffany lamp. So she hired me as a broker to work on her behalf, to research where the best dealer or the best auction house would be. I presented the various options to her after having done the research and talking about prices and negotiating figures and so forth. And she finally made her own decision, and as a result I couriered the lamp to New York and helped sell it and negotiated with her on the telephone while I was down there to make sure that we got the best possible price. So an appraiser will broker, but generally will not buy or sell. But that is something that you need to talk with your professional about. If you find somebody you want to work with, you can certainly ask what can they do for you, what can't they do, who would they recommend, if there are steps that you need to take for your precious property, objects of value, what person they could recommend for you to work with.
This is a question for Carol, Alice, and maybe Ned too, and it's about a term I keep hearing more and more. staging a house for sale. And we actually have friends whose daughter has gone into this business. And she says in Massachusetts, in order to sell a lot of these houses that people like us have had forever with our old-fashioned taste, this child, I mean, she's an adult now, but anyway, she's got quite a business going of staging a house where she takes all the, or most of the furniture out of the house, and she puts newer things in that young families want to see now. And I'm wondering if you're seeing that. And we have friends in Connecticut too that are being told, absolutely, it's all got to come out if this house is going to sell. And
Yes.
we'll put in new stuff.
Yes, there are some people that do that, just the staging portion in the upper alley. Alice and I like to repurpose pieces that you have, but in the majority of times, I bet Ned would agree, is that you just need to take things out. When you've lived in a house for too long, things start to get a little bit closed in. You add an extra chip and leaf in the table and over the holidays, and then you leave it. Makes the room look smaller. Most of the time, it's taking things out and adjusting a little bit.
And you can do a lot of this for yourself, because if you have a bookcase at home, just do a little case study on your own ability. If you have a bookcase at home and you see more than one item on a shelf, so let's say you have 3 books in one item, that's the limit. That's what a stager will do. Now, I'm sure they have more than one item on your bookcases. And all of them have meaning to you, but not to the person who's buying your house. And so you can go online and look this stuff up, and they'll tell you, one couch, only one coffee table, nothing on the coffee table, no magazines around, no family photographs. I don't know if that's still true, but you could probably take all your family photographs down and off the shelves, and you've made a big step.
This is a general comment, less is more, and it may, and you don't need to worry if you have to move out, because we may recommend that you only stage a couple of areas that are difficult to understand without furniture in them. Maybe funny spaces, and it might even happen with all your furniture. Let's revamp this dining room into the sitting area that it originally was designed for, and get rid of the dining room table that holds 45 people for Thanksgiving and things like that. So I think what Carol and Alice are saying is right on target. And yes, it does happen up here, but not a lot.
And the other part with staging is it is another cost. If you do have someone come in and stage, you take your items and either you've decided where they're going or they're being sold, or you put them in storage. Then you're paying a monthly fee for the items they're bringing in. So it is an expense. And if you have some pieces that you can repurpose in different areas, like Ned says, take the dining room out, put that as the sitting area. There's a lot of ways that outside eyes can help you very quickly. We went to a place in Eastman recently where the minute we walked in, I was like, oh, there's too much stuff right here. And before we left, we had reorganized a few little spaces, and the realtor came in and was like, oh my gosh, thank God you moved that. So it is easy to do. And I bet if you had family members come in, they'd tell you very quickly what you need to do.
More questions, please.
Could you explain a little bit about different types of appraisals? I have some pictures in a book that came from my parents' estate and also from my elderly aunt's estate that have values on every piece of furniture. And I understood that there's a difference between estate appraisal, appraisal for insurance, appraisal for going to an auction, and I'm befuddled. Very quickly, there are quite a number of ways to appraise one single object. It really depends on what the purpose is going to be. Generally, for insurance purposes, your insurance company wants to know replacement value. In other words, what would it cost for you to get, if your vase were damaged, lost, or stolen, what would it cost to get a similar or identical one back into your home? Maybe with some help you were able to find a replacement vase, but it's out in California. you would want your insurance company, wouldn't you, to pay not only for the purchase price of that vase, but also the cost of shipping it, packing it, insuring it in transit and so forth, to get it back into your home, get a replacement back into your home. That's what's called replacement value, and most insurance companies want a replacement value. Fair market value is another major type of value. There's also scrap value, there's liquidation value, there's cash value, there's all sorts of other ways of approaching value. But fair market value is what an object would sell for. Willing buyer, willing seller, adequate amount of time, and both of the parties being relatively knowledgeable about what they're buying or selling. So that is a little bit different figure. A fair market value is a different figure than a replacement value for insurance purposes. What I also want to point out is for these different kinds of values, an appraiser will actually look at different levels or different parts of the market. Replacement value probably is a retail figure. Fair market value is often an auction figure. But if something were damaged, lost, or stolen, you don't necessarily want to wait for it to a comparable piece to appear at auction, because God only knows when it would. So if something were damaged, lost, and stolen, you would have to probably go into a retail setting like a gallery and buy a replacement piece. That's why oftentimes replacement value figures are higher than a fair market value figure for the exact same object. So there are others, as I said, but those are the two main types of value that we would talk about it if you talk with your appraiser about what you had.
A lot of hands, this is great.
This is a question for Ned. Could you offer a few comments on sprucing up a place for sale and on selling the place as is, considering views, land use, and so on?
Sprucing up in our thought patterns are not spending a lot of money for you, but going in and saying maybe we should repaint the purple and pink and bright vermilion walls all white, and let's remove the wall-to-wall carpeting that the dogs have enjoyed more than you have for the last 20 years and put in a nice carpet there. But let's not change the bathrooms, even though they're a little antiquated, because that's a lot of money, and you won't see that money back. So that's really what we're trying to do. Selling as is a very hard subject to do, because almost every buyer that comes in will have an inspection of your home before it is consummated. And those inspections bring out negatives and weaknesses within the house that they want corrected. So a lot of times if you're going to put your home on the market, we'll talk to you about, let's have a pre-inspection before we list it and correct all the deficiencies that we're going to end up having to do anyway when the buyer comes in and finds them. And that makes your house more valuable because you've taken care of it. The outside, I kind of lost that question on the outside, but to me the initial impression is the outside. And let's make the walkway really attractive. Let's put some flowers out. Let's put a wreath on the front door. If your garage is falling down and it's a shed or something, maybe we need to shore that up or something. I'm not aware. Does that help at all? I hope.
Obviously, my voice, obviously, you've been talking about lifestyle change. Can you comment about what it is that people who actually come into Kendal do in fact bring with them? Do they, for the most part, is the net of what they bring in the valuable highboy and the rose medallion china and 4 matched crystal finger bowls that their grandmother used? Or is it something else, such as their fly tying bench, or their juggling set, or their set of matched harmonicas? I'm wondering about the lifestyle change that happens and what the equipment is that people actually bring into their small space and then both use and adore?
So great question. And I know Lisa and Ashley both have microphones, so please feel free to join. But we see the full range. I mean, I've heard residents talk about moving in and they completely, they just bought everything new. One resident said, IKEA is great. Okay, but also we've been in apartments where we've seen some furniture that has been, you know, it's been passed through the family for years and years and years. So there's a full range. I don't know if I'm able to give you specifics, but Ashley, you were.
I think your best bet is to talk to the residents today. The ones that opened up their apartments have done it to really welcome you in and ask these certain things. And it's so individualized, there isn't a checklist. Each person finds something of different value to them. So I think the residents today will be your biggest asset.
I have another thing, is that if you've been juggling in the last 5 years, bring your juggling set. But if it's been just moved from room to room, you probably aren't going to use it when you come. As for the harmonicas, if you are using harmonicas, if you could just pare it down a little bit to a couple of favorites. I think that's what happens is that so often you have loves, guitars, instruments, but there's always one that you tend to go to all the time, so, or two. And so that's the hard part, is that you feel like you're leaving things behind sometimes.
There's sometimes Carol and I wear different hats, and sometimes I decide that the item is really joyful to the person who has it. It's the thing that gives them great joy. And so I have actually, Carol, I'll confess, gotten things into Kendal apartments for clients that they really just didn't want to bring because they wanted to be efficient. And I said, we're going to find a place for the thing that makes you joyful. And that's what you need to keep in mind. I suppose if it's a giant piece of furniture, you may have to just take a photograph of it. But there are things in your life that when you look at every day, just gives you that little pop of joy. And that's what you should bring here. And that's probably the most important component to being happy here, is that if it's your kayak, they'll find a spot for your kayak, and so will you. If it's something small, then you can have it out on your coffee table. It's really completely up to you. And it's a lot of self-reflection, and some of it's just instinctual. So you have to think about it, and you'll know, I'm pretty sure.
Can I, just for a moment, sorry. I'm glad that you said that, Alice, because I didn't want to go against what some of you were saying up there, but I understand that the theme is primarily downsizing, but, to hear someone say, I mean, I understand you don't need to bring 5 sets of china, but to say, you won't be entertaining when you go to Kendal, that kind of makes me cringe, because if that's what someone loves to do, coming here is such, you are giving up a lot to come here, but I don't ever want people to think, oh, I can't do that now that I'm moving to Kendal. I mean, if entertaining is something that makes you happy, then you should continue doing that. Yes, you won't have 45 people for Thanksgiving, probably, because, you couldn't probably fit them in your apartment, but we have common rooms here that you can reserve, and you can have big gatherings, and, I think that is probably one of the biggest roadblocks when people think about coming to Kendal, that there's just so much that I do now that I won't be able to do when I go there. So Mary Jane, nothing, I know you didn't mean that in a negative sense, but it just, and as far as furniture, I do, and again, this kind of goes against what the downsizing ladies are saying, but if there is a favorite antique that you have, bring it. And then if you truly cannot fit it in your apartment, then you can get rid of it after the fact. But, you'll see a lot of apartments that have been very nicely decorated today. I can think of at least one that has a big king-size bed in the master, and it completely works because of how they've decorated that space. So.
I think the other quick thing is that it's interesting as an outsider that comes into Kendal occasionally, is that when people are thinking of coming to Kendal, I notice that they're saying, what am I going to be able to do? What am I going to have to leave behind? Yet when you meet the residents here, you see all the things that they're still doing. If they love to paint, they're still painting. If they love music, they still love music. If they want to go fishing, they still bring fishing. It isn't as if you have to leave everything behind. Sometimes I feel like I hear, and tell me if I'm wrong, you hear like you're saying, oh, I only can have 2 of my special hobbies. There's a lot of things you can do here, and I think it's just maybe the equipment you need to use that you might have to figure out a place to store it, not so much that to get rid of it.
And let me just, one comment here, something that hasn't really been discussed, books. Books. Many of you have been through the library and seen the wonderful space that is, but it is at capacity. So as far as coming here and donating your books, it could be a tough journey for that book to make it on the shelf in the library. So I just want to bring that up now, and so that kind of hits home with what can we do with that? Sorry, Ashley. Okay, question.
What about things like my scuba gear, the skis, the snowshoes, the bicycle? Where does all that go?
Stuff. That's a great question. Again, those are some decisions that you would need to weigh as far as what can I fit inside, under that roof, as George Carr kind of put it. So, you know, the outdoor closet on the porch, how much can that hold for you? You know, those decisions you would have to consider when you move in.
Scuba gear. How often are you using the scuba gear? Well, that's my husband too. It sits there in our basement. I move it from side to side. Then we go somewhere and there's the scuba gear that you could rent.
But we're right on the river, so.
This is a suggestion. It really comes from my wife when we downsized 15 years ago to move to the Upper Valley. On the list of helpful folks, you should have the dumpster guy.
Great point. Okay. Ashley.
So I'm going to be selfish and steal the mic for just a moment. These professionals are wonderful and they're very helpful, but what precipitates all of this? And that is when we're working through the wait list, which you all are on and have been and probably will be for a while, to one day out of the blue get a phone call from me saying, hi, how are you? Are you ready to join the ready list? And it's something that's almost overwhelming and most people go, no, not ready. And we move on. But I think it's important for us to explain that process, which really triggers all of these things. So I'm going to put my colleague, Mrs. Stone, on the spot and ask if you can just sort of walk through that process again.
Sure. So what that entails, and some people in the audience know what that entails, you would be asked to update your forms that you completed initially when joining the wait list, so medical records, financial records, and then once completed and submitted, you'd be asked to come in for an on-site assessment. And there is I think this goes without saying, but there's a pretty heavy emphasis on the medical portion, because that's essentially what Kendal is. And then from that point, you're on the ready list. I think the literature will tell you that it could be anywhere from the time joining the ready list up to maybe 2 years, but I can tell you that it's closer to a year, maybe even less than that at this point, depending on the type of apartment that you're interested in.
Thank you.
So we have time for a few more questions, and then we'll talk about it.
Am I on?
Yes, you will.
I think I don't know when the first one of these we went to, but we've been signed up, or at least been interested in this place for probably 25 years. And I think we were on our list before the place was started. So we've been coming to these things, and I think that this group is the best that we've seen over the years. The trouble is, it's depressing. Becky and I have been married 68 years, and we've lived in Ohio, California, now in Connecticut, and now thinking in New Hampshire. Anyway, and we've collected junk, eclectic stuff, all over the country. And one of the things that concerns us, we have some very beautiful pieces from Southern Ohio out of walnut. Spectacular. But can we get a decent judgment about the value of this in Connecticut or in New Hampshire? Or do I have to take a picture of it and put it on the internet?
Mary Jane.
Well, basically, there may be some experts around here. You'll find that most appraisers work in tandem with other specialists. None of us know everything, although we'd like to think that we do. And so oftentimes, whether it's studio glass or African masks or furniture from the Midwest, from Ohio, I personally oftentimes will call another professional and collaborate with them and do an appraisal. So yes, there are specialists, regional specialists that can be used as support systems, as it were, and we oftentimes work in tandem, and their opinions weigh in on conclusions of value. So yes, there may not be anybody right here in the Upper Valley who's an expert, but we can certainly help find those kinds of people for you.
Thank you.
One more question, if that's okay. Oh, I'm sorry, you've got two more questions. That's fine. If he's...
You mentioned the bridge loans. I assume the purpose of those is if you can't sell your house before you have to put down the fee. If we don't happen to have enough funds outside of our 403Bs or 401Ks and IRAs, is it possible to get a bridge loan on the value of the house to be reimbursed when it's done?
Yes, it is. We would go through the process of appraising your current house and making sure that the amount of financing we leverage against it is appropriate based on that value. The same terms would apply. It would be short-term financing, typically interest only, and most often than not, the loan is limited to maximum of 80% of the equity value of that home. And remember, as we're going through this process, we don't want to, while your short-term need may be that bridge loan, at the end of the process, when that loan comes to maturity, we want to make sure that we're keeping you in a position that allows you to pay that off. We're not going to over-leverage that property to the point where you feel constrained and pressure to take a value or an offer that's lower than what you would have ordinarily accepted. Yes, and lend against that real estate.
Thank you. So one more question.
How about bicycles? I'd rather not keep mine in my apartment. Is there a place outside of the apartment?
Garage. So we do have the carports and the parking garage, which are certainly locations you could store your bicycle. Yes. Okay. So at this point, I just want to thank you for the great questions. Again, it was intended to be a discussion. I think we engaged the panel here and some great questions. But if you do have specific questions, again, lunchtime is a perfect time to grab them and talk to them and certainly get to know them better. But at this point, thank you, panel, so much for your discussion. I'll ask that you stay on stage, but thank you very much. So, I'd like to call Peter Bean to the podium. And I mentioned he helped bring Kendal at Hanover here. He's been a resident since 2002. But I want to mention that I worked with Peter almost a year ago with also Lisa Stone and another resident, Ann Siegel. And we were working on finalizing the Fry Fund, which Becky had mentioned earlier. And it was this was the time when I first really encountered, working to come to a consensus within the Kendal community. Because I think I made the mistake of saying, okay, let's put it to a vote. And Peter quickly corrected me. And so from that point on, I know that if we're in a meeting here, it's come to a consensus. And I know that means everyone is heard. And Peter certainly instilled that in me earlier on, and I appreciate that, Peter. But he was asked to speak about Quaker values at Kendal and Hanover. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Peter Becky.
Thank you very much. Everything you've been hearing has been materialistic. It's all very important. Stuff, money, selling, where my bicycle goes, how many towels. We supply towels here. And so forth. And somebody said, maybe more of you thought, I'm giving up so much. You're not. This place opens up your life. And it's not in the material ways. And nothing has been said about that so far. So a little of what I say will give you some idea. You enter a new phase of your life which broadens it and makes it beautiful. You don't give up. A lot of that has to do with Quaker beginnings. And I suppose you know, I hope you know, that this place was founded and governed by a group of Hanover Quakers from the meeting here. It was built by Philadelphia Quakers from what's called Kendal and Longwood, which is not too far from Philadelphia. And I'm very happy to say that the man who was in charge, Lloyd Lewis, and who really built this place, is going to be honored next month by the Professional Society for CCRCs, which will name him, he died, so it's posthumous, will name him its first inductee into what it calls its Hall of Fame. Our Kendal is no longer governed by Quakers, but it still hopes to retain some of the Quaker practices and values that its founders put into operation as best they could when we opened 24 years ago in 1991. To honor them and retain them even if they have become, and they probably have become, secular equivalents to the original religious precepts. I'm going to begin by citing two practices. One has been referred to already. The avoidance of voting. Quakers do not vote. When you vote, somebody wins and somebody loses. Somebody's happy and somebody's angry. We don't do that. We use another method which we don't like to call consensus. We call it the sense of the meeting. And so you'll ask why. It's because in our view, a governing body searches for the truth so that all may join in its affirmation. Ideally, friends do not try to win an argument. They believe that this is the important thing, they believe that working together as a community is more important than simply getting things done. That's one practice. So we here in our board and our council do not vote. The second practice I want to mention is silence. Again, in the board, the residents' council, very often in committees, we begin with a Quaker practice of having a moment of silence. And what that does is, we hope, transfer us out of a normal manner, which alas too often is confrontational, into something better. Now, I'll talk about values in a minute, but I want to first do something else. I want to give an abbreviated history. Quaker concern for the elderly goes back, as far as we know, at least to 1696, when the Bristol meeting in England opened a home for the aged. Why? Because it considered them to be part of the extended family of the meeting. In America, as far as we know, the first Quaker homes for the elderly were built in 1702 in Philadelphia, of course. And then after that, many continued to be opened, generally in that same area, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, during the 18th and 19th century. The change happened in the mid-20th, when the practice was to build larger places like this one, in other words, complete healthcare communities. And the first Quaker one was called Folkways, 1967. The second was Medford-Lees, 1971, is in New Jersey. And the third was Kendal at Longwood, which I call Mama Kendal. And that opened in 1973. And owing to the energy of the man I mentioned earlier, Lloyd Lewis, who became its longtime director. Now, one of the residents of Mama Kendal was a woman called Elizabeth Gray Vining, quite a famous Quaker author, and she became more famous when the Emperor Hirohito in Japan in 1946 identified her to come and tutor his son, the Prince, Crown Prince Akihito, who's now the emperor. She kept a diary before she entered Kendal at Longwood. And she was 70 years old. And the diary was published a few years later. Guess what? It was called Being 70. In 1988, our board presented every future resident, people like you, of the still unbuilt Kendal at Hanover with an abbreviated copy of her book. And I'm going to quote a little from it because I hope that her very moving book will suggest to us some useful aids to living here. I'm not talking about stuff any longer. And these are all quotes from Mrs. Viney. Youth is for learning. Middle age is for doing. Old age is for enjoying. When you were old, as I, to my astonishment, now am, learning is also enjoying. And this is so important, the next. At 70, I can afford to be an observer. I am out of the struggle. I no longer have to prove anything. I can enjoy the thing in itself without regard to the prestige value or the effect that it may have on my career. My fundamental conviction about death and life is we each have some earthly task to do, and when it is done, we go home. And she's quoting Shakespeare, "Men must endure their going hence," says Edgar in King Lear. How can I be sure of this without believing in an anthropomorphic God? Only because I know that there is meaning in the universe, not chaos, and that love is at the heart of it. To live right up to the end, and still to welcome the end, this is what I should like to do. Meanwhile, There is the beauty of the sunrise. There is a deep joy of friendship. The excitement of watching the world careening on its way, the small, steady comforts of cold water, of bed, of a shower bath, of a new laid egg, of hot coffee. Apart from all the fuss and fume of moving, that's what we've been talking about today. Apart from all that, I find myself deeply satisfied and grateful that I am going to Kendal. The prospect of being part of a community, the opportunity of helping to make it a caring community, and the security for the future, all these are important for me. As to everyone else being old there, they will, most of them, be young old, enjoying the first exhilaration of retirement. Well, all that pertains to this Kendal, and they issue us into